everyone, and welcome to Achieve, a community committed to driving innovation and success through employee engagement. I am Stephanie Cleary, Achieve's Content Administrator. First, I would like to let everyone know about an upcoming employee engagement conference called EE Connect, scheduled for October 29th in New York City. Registration is open now, and the early bird special expires this Friday. You can find more information and register for this one-day conference at www.eeconnectevent.com. I'm super excited to present today's webcast sponsored by Glint, Navigating a New Path, Linking Employee Engagement with Business Outcomes. We are happy to be partnering today with Chad Bennett, Senior Consultant of People Science with Glint, and Alexander Purcell, Senior Manager of Engagement Technology and Analytics with United Airlines. Combined, they have well over 30 years experience in the employee engagement sphere, and we are thrilled to partner with them today to discuss the success they have had with employee engagement and how it drives business outcomes. A word from our sponsor, Glint. Our mission is to help people be happier and more successful at work. Most organizations want to create a work environment that helps their employees succeed, but they struggle to translate employee feedback into timely, effective action. At Glint, we recognize that a new approach was needed, one that truly helped leaders respond. Everything we do is designed to help people-driven organizations increase employee engagement, develop their people, and improve results. This webinar will end at 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. And we'll have about 10 minutes for questions at the end if time allows. At any time during the webcast, use your question box on your screen and we'll get to each question at the end as time allows. Tomorrow, we'll be following up with an email which will contain a link to the webcast as well as the recertification codes for both SHRM and HRCI, so keep a lookout for that. We have another exciting What's Next webcast coming up in October with Jason Lauritsen and special guest David Burkus called Unlocking the Power of Hidden Connections. So be sure to register for that as well. Without further ado, let me introduce our speakers today, Chad Bennett with Glint and Alex Purcell with United Airlines. Thank you for being with us today, gentlemen.
Thank you. We'll do quick introductions. Again, my name is Chad Bennett. I am a people science consultant here at Glint in Lincoln, Nebraska, and I have over 20 years of experience in the survey research and employee engagement space, and a real passion for providing people science insights to organizations that really help them drive a positive employee experience and ultimately business outcomes. Alex?
All right. I'm Alex Purcell. I am the Senior Manager of Engagement and Technology and Analytics at United Airlines. I've been an OT practitioner for more than a decade. I worked for smaller companies, larger government-funded companies. Currently, I lead the engagement survey work at United. I've been doing this for 2016, but have been at United for more than 5 years.
Awesome. Thank you. So we're going to go ahead and just dive into this. I like to typically start with a quote on the next slide here, and it's a quote by one of my colleagues. Her name is Sneh, and I think it really summarizes what we'll be discussing today. And it goes like this: the world's best companies involve employees and the solutions that impact them, and more importantly, makes it easy for leaders to see the link between business and people's success. And I think that's really important because organizations succeed when people are at their best and understand how they impact business performance. Employee engagement surveys, they provide us the opportunity to listen to our employees, to really involve them in the solutions that move the business forward. And when done right, it allows us to quantify the impact that they and their behaviors have on the business. And so I think that's a great way to frame what we'll be discussing today. We do have a poll question that we're going to open up here. And it's really thinking about, here on the next slide, about where you're at in your journey in terms of linkage analysis. Where is your organization at? And we have 4 choices here. Have you not even begun yet, so you're somewhat of a novice? Are you just beginning the journey, so you're kind of an advanced beginner? Are you underway but not fully proficient, meaning you're somewhere in the intermediate level? Or are you well on your way? You're either an expert or you're highly experienced in doing linkage analysis. And we'll let you guys answer here. While you're doing that, I like to think of this as a journey because you never truly arrive at a destination when you're doing linkage research. You never really stop and say, "Oh, we've answered all the questions that we have. We're done. There's nothing else to uncover." It's really ongoing and constantly evolving. And as things change and you get new data, you have to go back and have new questions, new hypotheses. And this reminds me of a quote that one of my professors used to always say, is that any great research should result in just as many questions as you have answers, which I think is so true, and it really speaks to the iterative nature of doing linkage research. While you're answering the questions here, I think we'll be closing that here shortly. Then we can move on to the next slide. Wow, so it looks like most of the participants here are either just beginning or they're in that intermediate phase, which is really good. I kind of expected it to be somewhere around that. No real surprises here. So I think this will probably be a great discussion. Hopefully we provide a lot of insights that will help you get to that expert or experienced stage. Anything else you want to add to the poll, Alex?
Oh, no, this is fantastic. This is a good mix. We have some experts, but generally people have not begun yet or are within the journey or are doing it, but not really proficient. So this is a good mix.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so if we go to the next slide, with everything that I do, I always like to really start with the why. Why do it? What's the purpose? And there are a lot of reasons for why you should do a linkage analysis. So really, when I think of the why, what's the purpose? There are many reasons, and really, I think it starts with to quantify the ROI, the return on investment in doing linkage research, the impact that employee engagement has on business performance. And we know that a lot of time, money, and energy is put into employee engagement efforts. And so it's really incumbent on us to really understand, is that return on investment worth it? And linkage research provides us that opportunity. It also helps us maximize where organizations spend their resources, their energy, and time to drive meaningful change. Every organization wants to reduce waste, including that of resources, time, and energy, and linkage analysis helps us do that. And it also helps us align people and their behaviors to the business outcomes that matter most. And I think that's important because at the end of the day, it's all about behavior change, right? The behavior changes that have a positive impact on the business. And this is quantified through linkage research. So if we move to the next slide, what is linkage analysis? This is just my definition of it. It's a series of analytical techniques, procedures, and models used to understand data relationships to answer business questions like the following. And it's not limited to these questions. There are obviously many others. But one question is, how does engagement impact employee retention, right? And turnover is costly, especially regrettable attrition. And so we can really understand the impact that engagement has on making sure our valued employees will stick around and we're investing in them properly. What aspects of the employee experience has the biggest influence on business results? How does change in engagement relate to productivity? As engagement moves over time, what impact does that have? What employee behaviors have the strongest link to a positive customer experience? I have a slide in here that will highlight an example of kind of what we've seen around what we can learn by aligning the engagement survey with customer sat data. And then what are highly engaged teams and business units doing differently to drive success? And so when you're able to link employee feedback to critical KPIs, organizational goals, operational metrics, can really help your organization uncover those levers that influence business results. In fact, when you can identify these kinds of empirical relationships, it really enables leaders to make data-driven decisions about where to invest their resources and the actions that can have a tangible impact on company success. It highlights the value and the impact of prioritizing really a more continuous listening strategy that really has an impact on the business. And while many of us on this call here know that that relationship exists, the impact is much more meaningful when it can be seen in familiar or local metrics. And so we move to the next slide here. This is an example of some research that we've done with the client where we're looking at what's the impact of engagement on attrition, okay? And so what we found is that engagement is highly correlated with attrition. And what we mean by engagement in this example is we have a question that we call eSat, and it's how happy are you working at your company? And one of the things that we see is eSat is much more influential to attrition than or retention than just asking about someone's likelihood to stay or move on, right? So, thinking about how happy you are with your experience and everything that makes up, why you show up at work every day is more impactful than understanding the question, a single item around retention or leadership or work-life balance. And so what the numbers show here is that those who are unfavorable on eSat, they're 5 times more likely to leave than those who are favorable, right? Think about that. If you're unfavorable in terms of your happiness at work, you are 5 times more likely to leave than those favorable. And that's higher than if you're unfavorable on the retention item, which is a 4.7 multiplier of retention for those who are unfavorable versus those who are favorable. And so, it really allows us to answer the questions, what's the best leading indicator of, say, in this case, attrition, right? It could be any other metric, but, when we think about attrition, I think a lot of times you think just asking people, what they think in terms of their likelihood to stay has the biggest impact, but no, it's really what they think and feel about their workplace experience. And it's a much more better predictor, at least in this example, than just asking some of these other items. And so, so just go back to saying that, eSat is a real predictor of attrition over some of these items. And if we go to the next slide, this next example does a nice job of really showcasing how behavioral indicators, things like frequency, can be combined with attitudinal ones like engagement to assess implementation. Meaning when we looked at, the same cohort of people over time, those whose eSat scores trended up over time, they saw a 30% reduction in attrition on average versus the cohorts whose eSat trended down over time, they saw a 50% increase in attrition. And so, the big takeaway in this study, at least, this finding is that sustained change in eSat really equals dramatic change in observed attrition for certain cohorts when you look at the same time period. So understanding the frequency and timeliness in which you connect with them and influence their happiness at their job can really lead to them wanting to stick around a lot longer. And think about what happens if you can monetize this type of finding. It really leads to a lot of cost savings. So moving on to the next slide, the question becomes, so what outcomes should we look at? And I think the question really depends on, what questions are you trying to answer, right? I have here, I just highlighted some of the common metrics that I've seen in my experience. These are just kind of general categories, and there are multiple outcomes within these major categories, but it really depends on the questions that you're trying to answer, what you have access to, and what you're trying to do in terms of moving the organization forward. And I think for most organizations and for most researchers doing this, they either tend to focus on 2 to 3 key metrics within any of these broader categories, while others look at it more specific to performance metrics that are unique to their business, industry, or objective. But these are just some of the common ones in terms of customer satisfaction, absenteeism, being, available to be on the job, productivity, all the way down to shrinkage, safety, and as we saw before, attrition and retention. The next slide highlights an example from our internal research, something that we've done here internally, and it really shows the measurable value we've seen with Glint clients as a result of our people success platform. And what this shows is that Glint customers who are in the top quartile of engagement, all right, they're in the top quartile of engagement, they're able to achieve significantly higher business results than those in the bottom quartile, right? They attract better talent and achieve higher performance, 35% higher Glassdoor scores, 69% higher recommendations, 42% higher stock performance, and then also 5 times higher market cap per employee. And what I really love about this study is that it shows that, using a single item engagement measure, going back to that eSat question I highlighted before, how happy are you working here? It can produce huge effect sizes, right? Similar to what we would see in the 5-item measure. And it really takes me back to grad school and really kind of challenges the notion that, multi-item indices are a definite requirement for valid predictions, where it's not always the case, right? It's a good rule of thumb, but not necessarily a hard and fast one. And I think the bottom line is that linkage analysis really helps us test assumptions and the hypothesis that we have. So this was an interesting study. So moving on to the next slide, there are a number of factors that you need to consider when trying to determine which metrics you want to look at and which metrics you want to link to engagement. These are just some questions that I think are kind of general that we like to start off with. Who's the audience for the linkage analysis, meaning the key stakeholders? What's important to them and how critical is this metric to their business success? How does it align with their strategies, business objectives? At what level of the organization is the metric measured? And do you have an identifier that can tie back to that employee engagement data? A lot of times we stumble at that point because we don't have the right identifier to really link it. So that's an important question to understand before diving in. Also, how consistently and reliably is the metric measured over the units of interest? I've seen examples where, there's a given metric for an organization, but it's captured slightly different depending on a region or a location. And so you really want to understand how consistent and reliable it is, as well as any other factors that might impact it or that you may need to control for. So these are just some questions you need to consider before diving in to any type of linkage research so that you set yourself up for success. The next slide highlights another example of some research that we've done. Yeah, thanks. And this is looking at a call center and customer complaint resolution on first calls. And what we found here is that for every 5-point increase to question number 3 here, as you see, is my direct manager makes the time to review my goals every quarter. For every 5-point increase in that question, it led to a 1-point increase in the resolution of customer complaints on the first call, right? And so, it really shows us that this behavior is really more predictive of customer satisfaction and goes back to that question of what behaviors really impact the customer experience. And from an employee's perspective, having that manager provide, direction, insight into performance reviews and goals really helped employees resolve questions on the first call, which really saves an organization a lot of time and money. And so that's a very cool study that someone I've had some experience with call centers and understand, how expensive and time consuming it can be when customers have to call in multiple times, not to mention the impact that it has on their level of engagement. So if we can reduce the number of calls or really the resolution of that call and satisfactory level on that first call, then that's a meaningful success measure for call centers. All right, moving on to the next slide. So, there's a lot of benefits that you all know that, I've kind of highlighted here It uncovers critical relationships, it reveals strengths in relationships between attitudes, behaviors, and outcomes so that leaders can proactively enhance their workplace experience and promote success. We can confirm or refute various hypotheses. And, a lot of leaders have a lot of theories and assumptions about what's true. And doing linkage analysis really helps us test those theories and hypotheses to confirm or refute that. The thing that I love is that it really builds confidence in the listening program, right? Organizations get more value from employee surveys when they find meaningful patterns and powerful insights through the linkage analysis. And this allows employees to even want to continue to give their feedback, knowing how it impacts them and the bottom line. Now, there are some considerations or some challenges, right? It's not easy. At times, there are weak or no relationships found, especially early on. You don't always find a strong relationship between variables and the outcome metric. But when you do, it really proves that the relationship exists. And over time, it shows the trends that will support business decisions. And I think that's very important and really reinforces the why and what we're getting out of it. But it does take time, considerable effort, and it's really an iterative process that never ends. It requires a lot of rigor and isn't just a flip the switch process. I think a lot of times there are people who think that, it's easy. You just, put some numbers together and it spits out things that are impactful or meaningful, but that's not always the case. A lot of times you have to go back to the drawing board and do it all over again, ask new questions, come up with new hypotheses. All right, moving to the next slide. I just wanted to talk a little bit and highlight our process here at Glint. We have really a pretty neat process in terms of understanding how to drive change through linkage analysis. And the success of any linkage analysis starts with properly scoping the project. And so, this is just an example where we typically start with the discovery phase. And during this process, our goal is to establish a clear link between what we're measuring, meaning attitudes and experiences, and the outcomes that define organizational success. So, what's your business problem? What are the KPIs? How often is it being collected in the units of measure? And then from there, we can either follow a more traditional approach to linkage analysis, or here at Glint, we can utilize some of our state-of-the-art technology for custom analysis. And with this approach, we can utilize our machine learning techniques to build models that we can use to train and test different data sets, and then compare that to actual business outcomes and continue to test over time as more data becomes available. And then once we've landed on a model, a verifiable model, we can load that back into our system, and then you can get alerts around parts of the organization that are at risk. And these are real time, and it helps you identify teams that are at risk of safety incidents or other measures that you're looking at. But at the end of the day, it really inspires meaningful change. And when leaders see the link between survey results and metrics they care about, they're more likely to be motivated to act and equip the organization to act on the results that really matter. All right, kind of wrapping my section of this up. The next slide shows the final example is something that has come out of our state-of-the-art approach and utilizing our modeling process. And this is something that we did with the mining organization. And what we found is that increasing specific drivers of engagement is likely to reduce injuries based on this model that we've built. And the machine algorithm, we trained it and combined it with engagement and injury data. And what we found was that the specific actionable drivers of engagement were around recognition, personal growth, and empowerment. These three things were better than, say, just a compliance checklist or safety plan, which, at the time was counterintuitive for some managers, but has really helped shift their thinking of the science of safety from just being about compliance to a culture and environment of commitment and empowerment, which I thought was pretty cool. It's really helped change how they're thinking about what does safety mean and how do we drive it. It's no longer just about a checklist, but it's about how do we recognize and empower and invest in people so that they're doing and practicing safe behaviors every day. The next slide is really an extension of that. I won't spend much time on it. It just really shows that, those who hit certain target levels in these three areas, recognition, personal growth, and empowerment, they saw a 25% decrease in average injury rate, which not only highlights the impact, but also the potential for improvement, right? So what happens over time as you're striving to hit some of these levels and the impact that has on injury rates. So wrapping this up, moving to the next slide. In conclusion, we know everything is changing in the world, from employees' demands to leaders' needs to the technology. And today we have the ability to better manage this change by building holistic programs that are really designed with the end result in mind. And the next slide really speaks to that. We talked about it starts with discovery. When you're able to, learn your business priorities, the strategies, future states, needs, and opportunities, it really can help drive measurement strategy, program design, and results. And so that's really what's highlighted on this next slide here. And when we think about, the business results, and we think about the end goal in mind, I think it leads us. This is really the thing that I love about this slide is right here at the bottom. Really, the insights that matter to leaders. If you can go back to the next slide, insights that matter to leaders, linked to resources that help them move the business forward. That's the end result, and you start there, and then you work from discovery through measurement, strategy, program design, and it gets you to that result. And moving on to this last slide here, when done right, we can really achieve the vision of creating an organization that's agile, faster, and more people-focused, and with conversations about priorities, performance, where growth happens at the right time with the right people, based on informed decisions by the right data. So that's my spiel in terms of the importance and why we do linkage analysis. I'll pass it over to Alex to share some insights from United.
Great, thanks, Chad. It's really great to be here, and I really appreciate the opportunity to share some of the work that we're doing at United. It's always an honor, really, to speak with fellow practitioners, and those that are just interested in the topic, because it's important that no matter what company you work for, how evolved your engagement practices are, our goals are the same. We want to make and help employees feel more satisfied, more engaged, just setting them up for success. Bottom line, if employees feel taken care of, they're going to take care of our customers, they're going to take care of each other, and that's how we're going to be successful. So what we're going to talk about today, you see the safe harbor, is really United's journey. We're still at the early stages of our journey, but I'm going to share our approach, our learnings, some of the early wins that we've had with linking employee engagement to business programs and also measures. The way that I see my current role, it's not just improving engagement. That's not the end state. It's really about driving business results and helping United be a great place to work. And that's really how we're going to be successful as a company, through our employees. So no matter, we did the poll, and no matter what stage you are in your journey, I'm really hoping that you find our journey helpful, no matter what stage you are. So this slide, this is our safe harbor. I'm not going to go through the safe harbor. Essentially, it's in summary, I'm going to share some specific information about United. I may make some statements that are forward-looking and aspirational. The actual results in the future may or may not come to fruition, and due to various reasons, and that's our safe harbor, and legal makes me do that. So that's quite all right. Really, in terms of what we do as a company, it's having trouble going to the next slide. Give me control. Thank you. There it is. Thank you. I do want to share a bit about United before we get into the core of the presentation. We're the third largest global airline. We serve more than 143 million customers annually. We have 4,600 flights per day. We're growing. We're expanding. We're 88,000 employees strong. We have the most comprehensive route network in our hub locations compared to any our competitors, and our hubs are in the 4 largest cities in the United States. But it's not without our challenges. Airlines in general and United in particular are challenged by various environments. For example, unpredictable weather, fierce competition. We have rising fuel costs, right? We're going to pay more than $2 billion this year than we did last year. But the important thing is, it's really about 2 years ago, under our new CEO, Oscar, and leadership team, we began to explore how we can find the competitive advantage, even beyond weather, even beyond fuel costs. And what we identified really is our biggest strategic imperative at United is really earning back the trust of our employees and customers. And so we recognized for so many years that we disengaged our employees from our mutual objectives and we lost their trust. And so since discretionary effort is so key to make us the best, and especially since we're in a service industry, essentially it's so important that we're able to engage and get that discretionary effort from our employees. So under Oscar and our new leadership team, it's really about building trust and really about building engagement with our employees. But as you know, employee engagement, as Chad talked about, employee engagement is really complex. If you go to the next slide. There's a lot that impacts employee engagement. There's leaders, there's social media. So you can go to the next slide, or you can give me presenter rights. Thank you. Sorry about that. There you go. Leaders, there's really social media, there's workplace policies, there's different generations that impact employee engagement, there's pay, there's benefits, there's workspaces. I know there's a lot of research around, or actually a lot of work with doing the whole open space framework, and we actually did some work at United, and we're realizing that sometimes it's actually counterproductive, and people feel like things are noisy, they're not actually able to do a lot of work. So actually sometimes we go back to the cubes. Employees' roles actually impact employee engagement. Competitors also impact employee engagement. Social media, this has come, it's a huge impact to our employees' engagement. Weather is another impact. So there's so many things that impacts employee engagement. And really, one of the things that we decided to do is really design a program with certain traits, specific traits that help us address these dynamics. And really the first thing is about being agile. And so we pulse multiple times a year compared to the traditional once every other year or once a year type of approach. This approach provides more real-time data to understand what's top of mind to employees at that particular pulse, right? Or at that particular time frame. We keep it simple. So employees don't want to take a long survey. Our surveys are quick, they're easy to take. They don't have a lot of time to take them. So we also have it via mobile that they can take. We found different creative ways to actually push different things to employees versus them going to a static page or anything, or waiting on an email, because email doesn't work all the time. We also are empowering the organization. What that means is that previously, it took months for us to get results to leaders or even senior leaders because it took so much time to analyze the data. We're now actually able to provide all people leaders at United with their results, with their individual results the day after the survey closes, which is really cool, right? And because we can start that action instead of waiting for a month or two, they can actually start taking action the next day. But, what this also allows us to do is really provide us the opportunity to have a consistent people metric. And so what that means is that we're able to trend across the company. We have one standard people metric, no matter if you're in airport ops, no matter if you're in HR, we all have the same common metric, and also provides us the opportunity to really measure and conduct these linkages because we have multiple data points over time. We're seeing progress. So since we started the Pulse, our program, we really have seen a 17% increase in employee satisfaction. Our response rate has increased by 28% since the start. Our comments, we have twice as many comments than we did when our survey started, our program started. It's nice to see that we also see results externally. For example, Glassdoor, we've increased 10 percentage points since September of 2016, and our culture score within Glassdoor has been the biggest change year over year. Our work internally really has helped us make us be more attractive to external candidates, which really impacts the quality of talent that we can bring in to United. A couple things that we've learned. So again, by no means are we in the position to declare victory, but we have learned many things along our journey. The first thing that we really have learned is really support from leadership is critical. We are fortunate to have really engaged senior leaders. We have some executive team members that actually, before they visit a location, they look at the comments for that specific location so they can actually frame their dialogue with that team, which is incredible. They're really clearly modeling how to do this, and if they're modeling at the top, that also cascades to other leaders because they show that's important. Communication, if you don't communicate what you've done, this is what we've learned, employees are going to assume that nothing's being done. And so communication is so vital. It's something that we're continuously working on because we haven't really cracked the nut perfectly because we're so big. But one of the things that we have done is that this is actually the first survey program, that we're actually sharing results on a consistent basis. And so we're transparent with the results, no matter whether you're in certain departments. We're as transparent as possible. So we've made some great strides in regards to communication and transparency, but there's still some opportunity. Third thing is really we've been really fortunate that since really this was Oscar and the leadership team's priority for the company, we've had a lot of business ownership. So this is not an HR type of driven effort. This is really seen by being driven by the business. And since it really came from the top, leaders make this a priority, which is really fortunate for this program, but it's so critical that we continue pushing that ownership to the business. We also continue to loop the business in when we make decisions as we evolve the program, because if it doesn't really help the business, if they feel overwhelmed, if they don't feel like we're listening to them, we got to question why it's there, because at the end of the day, again, we're here to drive business results. And then finally, although the goal of the program, again, is to build trust and to make United that great place to work, ultimately it's about helping us be more strategic in our decisions, in measuring our effectiveness, and ultimately driving those business results. So if business results are not part of your success metric in your engagement program, I would strongly encourage that you add them. Our methodology in regards to really tying back engagement to business drivers is really, when you think of engagement, it's both a noun and also a verb. And what that means is that sometimes we lose sight of the verb aspect of the word, but to truly make someone feel more engaged, you really have to engage them. in the verb form, like literally engage them. And so it's about leveraging your stakeholders. It's about going to employees, talking to them, and really trying to figure out what you can do to help them, right? So instead of just looking at engagement as just an HR thing, really looking at engagement as a business thing. And I have a plethora of engagement data. I'm here to help you be more effective. And that's really at the core of our methodology, just actively listening and learning and collaborating with different stakeholders. We're currently working on a year-long linkage that's a year long in the making. You're not going to always have success, as Chad talked about. It's a very iterative process, but really it's about 4 key things. It's about asking the right questions. It's also about looking at the noise and isolating and controlling the noise, potentially that's impacting your linkages. It's also linking your engagement data to establish business metrics. If the business cares about it, then consider linking to it. And also high impactful programs. We'll talk about what that looks like in a bit, but really it's about those 4 key things. Asking the right questions. So the most critical thing, in my opinion, is really making sure that the questions that you're asking are the right questions. So instead of getting off-the-shelf questions, we developed all our questions except our eSat question, which was developed by Glint. And the key thing that we really want to understand from employees is, what does trust look like at United? What does engagement look like at United? And really, we did that through job shadows, focus groups, other surveys. It was an iterative process, but it was really about listening and learning from employees and making sure that we had the right things that they cared about that were top of mind to them. And we also leveraged our stakeholders, our different programs, to provide input on the right questions that we're going to be asking. And then finally, our senior leaders. Our senior leaders were intimately involved with creating the questions. We actually provided a lot more questions to our senior leadership, for example, Oscar. And he basically said, no, we cannot ask all these questions because we cannot action off of these questions. And if we can't action off of these questions, how are we going to build trust? And so we have to only ask the questions that are the questions that we're going to act off. And if we're not ready to act, then we shouldn't probably be asking the questions. So they were intimately involved, and really we feel confident and that we really have quality questions. So that's really the first step. The other step is really, sorry about that, is talking to the different business stakeholders. So right now, we're working to link engagement to not just business metrics. So first is really identifying the business metrics that are important, like our customer service, which is a key priority for us, our safety, which is our #1 priority, but also other metrics like on time, right? So working with those key stakeholders and really understanding their data and partnering with them so we can understand each other's data. And then second, it's really about partnering with different programs, such as leadership development, diversity and inclusion, recognition, performance management. Again, we talked about safety, and really making sure that they fully understand that we can work together in a way that helps you measure the effectiveness of your program initiatives. And so that's really the first step, because it's not just about leaders action planning, it's about a collective effort together to really earn trust and build engagement across United. Before we get into the linkages, I'm going to share some examples in the next couple slides. I do want to kind of talk about what the process looks like. So, the key thing that we have, the cornerstone of our program, is really that employee data is kept confidential. Key aspect of our program. If we're building trust, we have to keep in mind this cornerstone thing in everything that we do. So we literally don't have access to individual information, and it feels great because we can say that to employees and really honestly say that to employees because we worked with Glint. So when an employee clicks on submit on their survey, that goes to Glint. Then Glint provides that data to us in aggregate. There's always thresholds to that, but then we are able to see the data in aggregate. When we work with different business units, so say like D&I, they then also work with Glint to provide Glint that individual information to them directly. So then we don't have access to that critical and sensitive information. And it's really about a partnership that has been critical with Glint and I to ensure that there's an effective balance of insights, because that data is really important and we want to see it in an aggregate level, but also we want to balance our cornerstone, which is confidentiality. And then finally, Glint keeps that data safe. They provide those business metrics back to us in aggregate. They also sometimes do deeper analysis with us, but then also sometimes there's analysis that's done in the platform. So some of the things I'm going to share with you today, I've done in the platform. Other analysis were more deeper dives that Glint conducted themselves. All right, so this is actually the first linkage that I really wanted to share with all of you was the first one that I did with our engagement data. I call it my baby. It's my first linkage. And so if you were to rewind a few years back, our corporate learning department consisted of about approximately 2 to 3 people. We built and delivered a lot of our programs in-house. And so needless to say, we weren't able to do a lot of large-scale trainings for leaders, unfortunately. We did a lot of targeted training, but nothing really large-scale. So an early effort, again, a few years back that was supported by our senior leadership team was a large-scale training. And what this meant, it was a training to all people leaders at United. And this is the first time we really partnered with an external vendor, which was costly, but the team really wanted to show the value of the training. So they generally use kind of level 1, level 2 type of reaction type of measures, kind of like, did you like the training, but really nothing that showed behavior change. So it was fortunate that they came. One of the fortunate things that they did, they actually approached it at a hub to hub level. So what that meant is that it was easier to actually isolate the leaders that completed the training versus the trainings that were not complete. And we did this pre-post type of work about 2 pulses apart, which was about 4 months apart. And so what this example kind of shows is there actually is 3 groups. There's locations or leaders that completed the training, which are in blue, and the change since the last survey is the actual number that you see. So for example, eSat for the leaders that completed the training was 4.3. We also are able to see the locations that the training was actually in progress while the survey was open, and the training, the locations that the training wasn't completed at yet is actually scheduled. And the results were actually really compelling. And what it actually showed is that the locations that the training that were actually done, we actually saw a change, not again a reaction change, this is actually a behavior change related to engagement for those locations that completed the training. For first and foremost, but then you also saw a decline whether you're in progress or if you were scheduled. We also later did some further analysis and really found that actually it didn't matter in terms of location, that what location you were. It actually just mattered if you took the training or not. And then also we saw some recency effects. So we actually did a lot with this data, which was, again, one of our first linkages that we saw. Second, really, again, we talked about partnering with D&I, and really what this showed is that, our chief diversity officer, his mission was really to make diversity more than something that you do on every second Friday of every month, but making it a key part of our business strategy. So one of his team's larger scale programs is actually business resources groups. It's kind of like an affinity group. So the intent of these groups is that you want to provide employees a network of fellow employees that share common interests, and also it's helpful to help employees understand that no matter where you're at, you might work in Newark, you're not alone, and this is a great way to make, even though United's big, to make it United a little smaller for everyone. So they wanted to understand if BRG membership was actually impactful to engagement. They actually helped us design the inclusion question. So they're actually particularly interested in that question. And what we found is that people that were in the BRGs actually had higher inclusion scores. In regards to satisfaction, we didn't really see too much of an effect. It was only a 1-point difference between if you are or aren't. But specific to safety and inclusion, we actually did see a difference. We actually did some further analysis because one of the things that they were considering on their strategy is actually doing more field BRGs. And what we saw is that, that's actually a good idea because the impact that you see in the field is actually greater compared to like our corporate locations. So again, don't forget about our corporate locations, but if your strategy is actually expanding it to the field, you actually see a bigger return for the people that are in the field than you actually see it in corporate. So go for it. Great idea. And again, we're helping them really make a decision related to their strategy. The next one really is partnering with our recognition team. And so what this was is, our biggest opportunity at United was really recognition. So one of the things that our recognition team did was actually roll out a social recognition platform. And what they wanted to know, think like Facebook for recognition, right? And what they wanted to know is that if givers or receivers, if you're either, does that actually impact your engagement, or is there a relationship? And we actually saw a relationship whether you're a giver or your receiver. And so what you actually see in regards to the numbers is the comparison versus company average. So in this case, if you've never given a social recognition, you're 2 points under related to recognition under the average. If you're actually a top 10 giver, you're actually 7 points above the company average. So good to be a giver. And what we also saw in regards to reception, it's also good to receive. So if you've never received a social recognition, you're 2 below the average related to recognition. But if you actually receive in the top 10 percentile, you actually are +5 on the average, which they were really excited because that actually showed them that a lot of their work was really making, not necessarily couldn't see causation impact, but we did see a relationship there. The next slide was actually really intriguing because we wanted to see if that actually kind of cascaded over to leaders. So we wanted to understand from a leader standpoint, if you're a top giver and a leader, do you also have the most engaged team? So for example, what you see on this table, so if you're a bucket of leaders that actually have never given the social recognition, your direct team's recognition score is actually 3 points above the average. If you are a leader in the group of the top 10 givers, so you give a lot, your direct reports recognition score is actually 3 points below the average. Really, really interesting dialogue with them. And this could be for several reasons, but I think this really points to the fact that there isn't really one fits all approach to recognition and engagement. Quality over quantity is key, and peer-to-peer recognition, the impact there might be stronger than leader to team. So I would think that, if you are an employee from your leader, you probably want more of a personal touch. So, the takeaway is important. It's important to educate leaders and employees about best practices related to recognition as a whole, so they're able to utilize social recognition as one tool of the entire toolbox versus overusing it. The other thing, and this is actually close to my heart, I used to be on the performance management team, and one of the things that we did most recently is actually they made some changes to their mid-year process, and we rolled out a survey, a mid-year survey to all our M&A employees, because we really want to understand, hey, we just made some changes. How were they received? If it actually helped the quality conversation from employees, leaders to employees. So we rolled out this special survey, and what we saw is that, 5% unfortunately did not have the conversation with their leader. We saw 13% had the conversation but did not find it helpful. And then we saw 82% of the population, which was encouraging, did have the conversation and actually did find it helpful. But what we actually also wanted to see is that if they were having conversations prior to the mid-year. So this is their actual engagement feedback question. So this is their response on the feedback question even before the mid-year survey. And what you actually see is two things. It's probably better to not have the conversation in terms of your feedback score than have a poor quality conversation. So it's pretty apparent that it's really important that you have a quality conversation. But what we also saw is that employees that rated the mid-year as really helpful also had the highest feedback scores, even historically. So they're already getting that. There wasn't a big change that actually made things better. Things were already happening, and this actually just helped accelerate some of the work that was already happening. The second to last slide is really talking about leaders. So we actually did the same exercise to leaders and really wanted to understand whether their direct reports feedback scores even before they answered the mid-year survey. So the question we asked to leaders was, these changes that were made in the mid-year actually helped me make a more quality conversation with my directs. So that was the question that we asked. We broke it down by favorability, neutral, and unfavorable. And what we actually also saw is very similar, is that the leaders that already were doing it and had high feedback scores from their team also were the leaders that said, oh yeah, the changes that you made, they were helpful. So, engagement really creates those conditions for performance management to work. And so there is such a strong relationship between engagement of things that are already being done compared to, looking at a mid-year type of survey. And then finally, I know we're at the top of the hour. One of the things that we've been able to do with partnering with Glint is really looking at our safety data. And so what we found was that although we don't have access to individual information, we're able to partner with Glint. And what we found is that the question we had is, does actually engagement impact whether employees are being injured at United? And what we found was that yes. We found that we were actually able to predict a quarter out whether an employee is going to be injured 33% of the time. And so adding engagement to our model actually improved the model by 4 times, which showed the impact of engagement. And what we finally saw is that employees that are responding favorably to those different questions that impacted their engagement were actually 50% lower likely to be injured than those that were responding unfavorably. So again, the takeaway here is really utilizing engagement and trying to be proactive, working with different partners to make United safer, because that's the end goal. Because we really want to be that's the most safest company that we can be for our employees. And finally, we're at the top of the hour, so I'd like to thank everyone that's on the call today. And thank Achieve and thank Glint for their continued partnership.
Yes.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Alex.
We'll collect some follow-up questions, and I'll send those to Chad and Alex since we ran out of time, and they will be included in the follow-up email tomorrow. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today.